Okay, Rose said, still a little bit wary of the situation. So, what you're going to need to do is take a few steps back, the man said as he began to pull something from his pocket. What appeared to be a metallic sphere of some kind. There didn't appear to be anything to it, like it was just a big metal ball bearing or something. Rose took a few steps back as the blonde woman closed the door, latching it closed, with all the numerous deadbolts and whatnot. The man held out the metal sphere directly in front of Rose. Suddenly, it began to make a strange humming noise, at which point the man released it, and it simply stayed there, floating in air, as if it was just levitating. At that moment, Rose began to see shifting along the surface of this metal sphere, as holes began to open up in its form. As they did, what appeared to be some sort of cloudy silver mist came out of it, like a fog, or steam, or smoke. She couldn't really place it, but it had a metallic look to it. As strange as that sounds for something that appears to be more like a gas. For a moment, Rose was a bit frightened, almost beginning to take a step back. "Whoa, what is that?" Rose announced. "Don't be scared, kid," the man said. "It's not poison gas or anything like that. You probably won't grasp the technological aspects of it, but those are nanites, microscopic machines. You don't have to worry, they're not going to do anything or make contact with you, but you're going to need to hold still. This process works by creating, well, a high-intensity field around you and sending various pulses of energy out on a microscopic scale. Countless different forms of them. Basically, the nanites are going to surround you, and once they do, they'll start emitting these pulses of energy. It's nothing that you're going to feel. It won't hurt. It won't even tickle. But that smoke that you see is basically a bunch of microscopic machines fluttering about. They'll collect the signals that bounce back from the energy that passes through you, the energy that bounces back, how fast it does, how intense the response time, using countless different wavelengths of energy and trillions of receptors. We can get a scan that's more detailed than anything that any doctor would ever be able to give you, getting a read of you right down to the DNA level. All of the nanites will computate the results and transfer it back to the primary source, the metal orb you see floating there, at which point they can produce a high-depth, extraordinarily detailed scan. I've already included the scans that I got when I was originally on your mother's homeworld, from the numerous races that I encountered while I was there, including both your mother's and your father's. So I should be able to, without any doubt, give you an accurate estimation as to what your development is looking like, whether there are going to be any problems. Once again, it's non-invasive. "Okay," Rose replied. "You really should have told me the nanite thing up front. You know, most people would be really weirded out by that. If I didn't just find out that I was an alien, that would probably be terrifying. Actually, everything's a little bit scary in perspective. If you hold a torch up to a caveman who's never seen fire, he's gonna get scared. If you were to bring a gun into the Middle Ages, when all they had was bows and swords, they'd think you were a sorcerer. If you brought a cell phone to the age of the Salem witch trials, they'd burn you at the stake. Technology and people's awareness of it tends to be fairly relative. People are used to things that they experienced and scared of things that they haven't. Understanding equals a lack of fear. The only reason you're afraid is because you don't understand it. As stupid as it is, that's basically humanity. And we don't seem to be growing out of it. But I am ever the optimist. Hopefully we can get our shit together. Trust me, we're gonna need to. So, for the time being, stand still, kid, the man said as he leaned onto the kitchen table, taking a cigarette out of his pocket and lighting it. Rose took a deep breath and stood still, as much as she could. As she did, the smoke or mist floating from the sphere began to spread out. At first it was very thick, like a cloud of smoke, but then, as it left the orb, it began to spread, getting thinner and thinner, and beginning to drift around Rose's form. Some of it actually started nearing her face, at which point she covered her face and held her breath, scared that she'd somehow breathe in little microscopic machines, the idea of which terrified her. "What part of hold still aren't you getting?" the man said. "You don't have to worry about them getting into you. They're programmed not to do that. They're very good at their job. Unlike people, machines don't fuck up. It usually tends to be user error. You're safe. I wouldn't use this on you if I thought there was any possibility it was gonna hurt you. Just relax. Let them do their job." Rose slowly removed her hands and began to breathe again, trying to stay calm as this strange swarm of nanites spread out around her more and more, until there was what looked like a thin sheet of fog or smoke drifting around her entire body that seemed to get denser the closer you got to it, and spread out thinner as it moved away. For a moment, Rose stood there in the cloud, wondering when it was going to start, sort of slowly looking about the little cloud of nanites circling her, and without any warning whatsoever, they simply started to build again, moving away from Rose's form and back into the sphere, like little trails of smoke, getting thicker and building as they re-entered its form, leaving Rose. "What? Did something go wrong?" Rose said as the cloud left her behind, disappearing altogether inside of the orb. "No, nothing went wrong," the man said. "Everything worked perfectly fine. The nanites did their job, and their job's over." "I mean, it was that easy?" "Yeah, kid, that easy," the man said, taking a step forward and grasping the orb still floating in the air. Suddenly, there was a small ripple outside of it, like the orb was water, and suddenly a drop hit it somewhere, and a ripple flowed through it. At first just one, and then another and another, starting from the top of the orb and pulsating downward into the hand of the man now holding it, which looked rather spectacular to Rose. But after about a dozen of those pulses, the object simply stopped, returning to looking like a simple metal sphere. "Well, ain't that something? You are definitely a weird kid, even by your home planet standards," the man said, getting a curious expression on his face. "What are you talking about?" Rose replied, as the man tucked the small metal sphere back into his pocket. "Oh, it's no problem. I'll just show you," he said as he raised the hand that he used to put the sphere away into the air in front of Rose. But all there was his hand, palm up. It looked no different than any other hand she'd ever seen. It wasn't carrying anything. Was it invisible, maybe? Rose thought to herself, as she began to see changes begin to take shape in the man's hand. At that moment, it seemed as if the skin opened itself up, and there was a rush of movement. She began to see metallic tones and a silvery fluid that would form solid shapes within it, and eventually what looked like glass. She stared at the palm of his hand in amazement as it happened, and before she realized it, there was a flash of light that emitted from his hand, beaming out from the glassy surface at the core. And in that flash of light, appeared a very sizable, I guess you could call it, a holographic projection. It was Rose, and the projection was flawless. It was as if there was a smaller sized Rose simply standing above his hand, complete with all of her clothing, her jewelry, her hair, everything. The hologram even seemed to move in natural ways, like she was watching someone on the end of a camera, an actual person in some distant place. But it was her. She can't be watching someone somewhere else. And it wasn't simply a copy of what she had done during the scan. The movement seemed unique. Okay, Rose, this is your scan. I've rendered all of the information that I've got into a high-fidelity holographic simulation of you, which I can use to display all of the vital information.